Good morning. My name is Mike McGhee, and I'm with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. Prior to my position for the last 10 years or so as a lake restoration project coordinator, I was a fisheries management biologist in the field for 25 plus years. Also ran a small fish hatchery, so I'm very aware of not only field but issues there, larger issues too. Partnerships equal success. I guess the message I can say there, this is a state-driven project and we really push it and we're part of it. But historically, in my career early with the department, we sometimes adopted that attitude that we're the DNR. We're going to come in and we're going to fix the problem and we'll let you know when we're done and when we leave town. That doesn't work. If you don't have strong local buy-in, strong local support, any of our lake restoration projects do not move forward. We have very little public land in the state of Iowa. Requires us to really cooperate and work with private partners and private individuals on land. And so there's no mandates that you have to do this or have to do that. So it's really critical. What I want to tell you about Iowa, and just a few basic facts. We do, with the Center of Ag and Rural Development at Iowa State University, they do some survey work for us. And I'll discuss a little bit about Iowa here, but 6 of 10 Iowans visit lakes every year. Rural economy, only 3.1 million people in the state of Iowa. I can imagine the visitations you have here in Texas. But what's important to this is we get along there. There isn't a politician in the world that wouldn't be happy with the 60% constituent base when it comes to election time there. So it's a supermajority. They visit lakes 8 visits per year, and in Iowa alone, 55,000 square miles, our lakes generate $1.9 billion in annual spending by Iowans. And this just isn't fishing. This is all the economics. This is the driver. It's a major business is what it is. And it is, I'm sure of that. This is our most popular activities in Iowa lakes. You can see fishing still number one. Moves on down the list here. I think what the important message is that many of us today here are probably either property owners or live along the lake or primarily here from fishing. When you get into serious lake restoration, you have to include these other folks when you move forward with projects to be successful. It requires bringing diverse groups and individuals together, and then you find out what's the commonality that you have, which is the lake itself, to move forward with projects. This just shows Iowa. And far northeast part of the state's karst topography and trout streams. We don't have much for lakes up there. We have some natural lakes in the northern part of the state, and then our southern Iowa drift plain would be something that would continue down and not dissimilar to what we'd see in parts of Missouri, Nebraska, Kansas. And then we're bracketed on either side of the state, our state, with the Missouri River, and on the not much of a fishery really there, unfortunately, but on the far eastern shores of Iowa we have many backwater areas and navigation pools for the upper Mississippi River, and it's quite a resource in itself. This is our makeup of Iowa. This is what we face. That cropland number is closer to 65%. So 65% of our landscape in Iowa is in row crop production. And so it's one of the issues we deal with water quality. Very nutrient-rich, highly eutrophic, very nutrient-rich systems in Iowa. Ice cover, we have about a month to 4 months of ice of the year. We have ice cover on our lakes. We're looking right now at about 134 significant public lakes in the state of Iowa. Constructed man-made lakes, there's about 90. Natural lakes, we do have natural lakes in Iowa, 25. Surface mines, oxbow lakes, which are associated with large river systems. And we have 4 Corps of Engineer reservoirs in Iowa from anywhere from 5 to 25,000 surface acres at normal pool levels. So not the large systems that you certainly have here in Texas. These are our problems, our issues, nutrients and soil. This is what drives our success in many cases, or what leads to the advanced deterioration of some of our systems in Iowa. And so our program is really focused around multiple use systems. They can be water supplies. We generally don't deal with systems that are just water supply systems. We want diverse, multiple use areas. We assess and work in the watersheds, and we try and establish watershed controls either in place or underway before we undertake major lake restoration. We so believe in this. We tried restoration and lake restoration through the years there, and we'd be successful for short periods of time, and then we'd end up back in the same place again. And what we found out that if we didn't take the watershed in conjunction with the lake and take a systems approach, long-term success with serious dollars just wouldn't happen. We so believe that our fisheries management biologists in the state there, for a portion of their career now, we take away the shocking boats and the nets and everything, and up to 25% of their time now is spent on watershed and water quality issues. If you don't get that straightened out, then you're doomed to just continue. You're kind of like a hamster on a wheel. You're just going round and round and round. You're chasing your tail. And so we have switched our direction. It's not an easy concept. When I went to school, I was trained to be a fisheries biologist, and it was all about fish. We're thinking bigger. So what we look at is our water quality, watershed hydrology. We rank some of our systems. We look at socioeconomics. We look at their proximity to metropolitan areas. We look at potential and feasibility. And why I want to say that is I liken it to being a dog owner. Let's say I own a dachshund. My neighbor's got a greyhound. And I'm going to say, I want my dachshund to be able to run like that greyhound as fast as he can. It's never going to happen. But I'm going to make him the best darn dachshund he can be. I'm going to train him and be the best darn dachshund he can be. And I think that's with lake and lake restoration work. You shouldn't limit yourself, but you also have to have realistic expectations. So you're kind of given the proximity of the lake and its watershed and some of the various uses that go with it, but you have to recognize that and operate your program and your program's success within that. And so what we did in Iowa here, one of the ways is we've ranked our lakes. Sometimes we use a graph, sometimes we basically try and take our systems there, and many of them would unfortunately have poor watersheds and poor water quality. And our goal is to push the systems up to this far right-hand portion of the lake, our best and most stable lakes with the best water quality, the best desirable fisheries. And in some instances, we have lakes that are already up in there. And it seems like we're always addressing problems and dealing with problems. One of the things you also sometimes need to concentrate is making sure you keep those systems that you have up there, keep them in that portion of the graph. Don't let them get back down into these other areas here, because it's difficult to push or move these systems in those directions. And so here we have protection, in-lake improvements, watershed work, and then watershed work, what it might need to improve water quality. And we are centering our lake restoration program in Iowa around water quality improvements. It's not that we don't believe that the fisheries are important, because we do, but our fisheries are driven by our water quality. 50% of our lakes will maintain a Secchi disk, or a water clarity level of about 3 feet, about half the time. We're trying to push that water clarity even greater than that. Of course, the one thing you do when you increase water clarity, then you get a response sometimes with aquatic vegetation, too much, or you can also, with a lot of nutrients, push to algal problems. In Iowa, it's primarily blue-green algae. We do not have golden algae at this time in Iowa. So we base it off the basic for the old EPA 319's Clean Lakes model. Unfortunately, in the 1994, it went away. It used to be funded by the federal government, and we had an opportunity to utilize that program to help fund our projects, but unfortunately it's gone. There's a 319 program that's out there that works on watersheds. They're just underfunded. So it's a good model. It's one that follows, and we look at assessment. The lake improvement starts in the watershed. We do shoreline work, we do in-lake work, and this is a before picture and sometimes an after picture. But it can be very expensive. And so these are our goals. 4.5 feet of water clarity 50% of the time from April through November. We want our beaches to meet recreational use standards. Like I said, we're trying to bring diverse groups into the restoration effort. It's not just about fishing, it's everything. Sustainable, healthy lake systems, and we want to remove these lakes from the impaired waters list. One of the critical things I think with lakes is we forget sometimes it's recreation. We go and we enjoy them. But lakes are critical infrastructure, no different than a highway that have to be maintained. And that's what I think Jeff alluded to in the past. We've built a lot of these systems here. That's the really neat thing, to build a new lake and to have a new lake, but maintaining one. It's no different. You buy a new house and you're excited, and 10 years, 15 years down the line, you have to replace the roof. It's not near as exciting as when you bought the house, but you have to fix the roof. If you don't do it, you get leaks, you ruin part of your house. And this is with our lakes. We have to, and that's one of the issues we found dealing politically in Iowa, is you have to tell them, get the message out there that it's a critical infrastructure. It's economically important to the state. It sometimes drives decisions as why not necessarily businesses, but certainly businesses, their employees, why they live in an area. They don't just work for you 9 to 5. They recreate, they do things in the evenings and the weekends. They need places to go to recreate. And if you don't have a quality recreational outlet, sometimes people will go elsewhere. They'll take a job someplace else. So it is absolutely critical that we get this message out there. There's smaller systems or larger systems, but in the state of Iowa, $1.9 billion of activity centered around lakes a year. That's Iowa. I'd hesitate to think what that number is in Texas. It'd be staggering. And that's what I don't think they realize at the state capitals sometimes. We need these group of individuals like you here that work on habitat. But if you have folks or you have people that aren't necessarily want to be out there in the water working, we need those people from a political standpoint or from a standpoint that can work politically and drive home the message with our agencies as to how important lakes are to the economy of Texas and to the well-being and what people are looking for there. And if you can get that message out there, then you stand a chance of tapping into state resources to help us. We at one point had hoped that the federal government would step up with dollars, but I'm becoming less and less, trying to be a positive guy, but I'm not very positive about the federal government stepping in to help us. I think this is something that's going to be locally driven. However, many of our water quality issues are driven by federal policy. For example, federal ag policy, what they do in the watershed, perhaps putting nutrients into the system. So they've provided all the infrastructure and everything in place to help the ag economy move forward, but we don't deal with the consequences sometimes with those programs. We use a system in a lot of our places called community-based planning. This was tough to sell to our bios because we like to stay with the hook and bullet crowd and just stick with people that are like us, that like fishing and like to angle. And this requires you to step into the group, and you're meeting with city councils, business leaders, the power boaters, for example, and you have to find out, bring all the parties together, find out what their concerns are about the lake there. We developed local stakeholders groups. We have a technical advisory team that's primarily composed of people like not only from Texas Game and Parks, but it'd be your NRCS, your soil commissioners. Bring them all together to work towards a common goal of improving restoration and improving their lake. This is where we're at around the state of Iowa right now, either in progress or in maintenance or in planning and evaluation status. We're trying to really keep our program lean. There's only 2 of us that are specifically assigned to this program, and then the rest of it we use our bios and we just get out there and beat the bushes and work with people. So in essence, we probably have friends groups around the state too. It's just a little bit different for us, and I guess maybe we're staying within our borders. We're a little bit different in that our lakes certainly aren't the size of your big reservoirs down here, but the principles are the same, but they are very important to us. Fantastic fisheries they can be, diverse fisheries, just certainly not as large. And here's an example of a lake, 300 acres approximately, which isn't huge, I understand, but in 1950 when it was built, it was the largest lake, man-made lake that had been built in Iowa. That's 60 plus years ago. Have a watershed with a mixture of timber, row crop and everything. We've spent a lot of money working with the federal ag programs and the state programs and our dollars to improve the watershed, to improve the water quality. This is what it looked like when we started. This is what it looks like now. We had to do a major dam rebuild. The lake was 50 years old. We had a spillway that was leaking, and we had to deal with that. We couldn't get dredging. We use dredging sometimes. We couldn't find a place to put the dredge spoil material from a land to buy a landowner, so we had enough ground. We raised the permanent pool of the lake by 2 feet and reestablished the shoreline by doing that in this system here, and improved it. At the same time, it's a major state park at this area there, and they did major renovations to the state park. So it's a total system renovation with work in the watershed and the dam rebuild, raising the dam, shoreline work, inlake. We did do some inlake dredging and placed it in state property. We put $7 million in this project to get it done, so it's not cheap. We are receiving from the state of Iowa just general fund or its infrastructure money. This last year, for example, my budget, I get $9.6 million from the legislature every year to work on lake restoration. It's averaged a little bit less than that over the last 7 to 9 years, so we've in essence had about $70 million that we've been able to pump into lake restoration within the state of Iowa in the last 10 years or so. It did not happen until we were able to establish that connection, that it's just not about fishing, it's just not about recreation, it's about economics, It's about infrastructure. We're not building new lakes. In fact, one of the things, we even have this with our commissioners. They'll say, my gosh, I can't believe, Mike, you're spending $2 or $3 million on a lake restoration project. I say, okay, let's not spend the money on this lake restoration project. Let's build a new lake. So let's say it's just a 200-acre public use, public recreation acre system there with a state park around it. I've got to buy the land from willing landowners and it's got to be like an 800 or 900 acre contiguous block of land. Find a place where I could build the lake, not in a floodplain so that we have issues. Work in the watershed, build the dam, put all the critical park infrastructure and the roads around it, and then have a new place for all of us to go recreate in. I've taken a $2 or $3 million restoration project, and to establish that new lake, I'm $25 million. Near a metropolitan area, it might take $50 million to accomplish that. We protect what we have, we enhance what we have, and that's what's out there. One of the critical things that's kind of neat that we've come across is we have problems in our lakes, have these old spillways that are those long concrete chutes that start down at the bottom, and then when the water flows out, it goes down these chutes, and we call them spillways. What they are, they're fish ladders, because we get rain events. And if we don't have a vertical drop in Iowa of about 7 to 9 feet, somewhere within that chuted spillway, during rain events, we'll get fish movement, undesirable fish species. It's never the good things that come back into the lake. Come right back into the lake. In fact, we would renovate some of these projects years ago, and then a few years later, we'd get carp, for example, back in the lake. We'd excluded carp from the lake, and everybody would say, they'd blame it on somebody that brought them in with minnows, or we didn't do a good enough job in the watershed. No, we did everything we were supposed to. We just were providing a fish ladder for them to come back up. So these spillway modifications can take $500,000 because you get the engineers and hydrologists and everybody involved and dam safety people. One alternative one of our engineers has come up with is we just went into the spillway and we built with metal and steel there a grate system. In essence, it's about 100 feet long. It comes right up there, and so what it does is the water comes over the spillway here, it comes out here, and it dissipates energy and dissipates all the water through that period. It can't clog because it has places to fall through, but yet the fish get up underneath that. They can't jump up and go through the barrier to get into the lake. So what was taking $500,000 in some instances, $400,000, $35,000 to $50,000. We can put something like that in right now that's working for us. And I didn't think of it. It was just one of our field engineers said, this is crazy, spending this much money on redoing a perfectly good spillway. What about this? And so we're using this in some instances in the state. So these are the sort of innovative things that sometimes happen as you move forward with restoration projects. No project, no money you get from the capital comes without strings attached. The strings attached are very doable. I have to provide an annual report to the legislature. I go before an infrastructure and transportation committee every year and have to talk about my program, what I've accomplished, develop a budget, and what we're planning on doing in the next year. When we first started, everybody likes to meddle, and they want their project done first. And so we'd get this legislation, we would get the money, and then they'd want to direct it, tell me how I had to spend it. But after a while, they developed a confidence level in our program, and we kind of provide a 10-year budget strategy moving out there with where we think we can spend our dollars and on what projects. And now they're letting the system and our evaluation, our lake classification system work now. And so we don't get the strings attached. We get the dollars, but they let us prioritize and move money to projects. And it's not always about ranking the projects from 1 through 50, for example. We group our projects because sometimes people just aren't ready to move forward with restoration. So you move on to the next project and or just the feasibility of being able to accomplish it. So we want that flexibility. But as you saw in those past slides, we're in a number of places around the state. We still have a lot of work to do. It's not cheap. How this ties into the specific habitat work that some of you folks are doing is very critical. We do spend money and we do fish habitat, but we take a systems approach. And then when we do this in-lake habitat work, it maximizes the benefit of that habitat work because we want longevity there. And if the lakes are drawn down, or sometimes we're doing these restoration projects without drawing the lakes down, we can move forward. So it all works together to move forward to improving not only the water quality, but the uses of the lake, we'll see anywhere from a 25 to 50% increase in usage of these systems after we've done it. Lake property is some of the most valuable property in the state of Iowa. In the last 10 years, when property home values have stayed relatively stable or diminished in places, the valuation of lake property has increased almost over 50% in the state, taxable evaluation. Most of our natural lakes have homes around them. Most of our man-made systems do not have homes right on the lake shore themselves, but near the lakes there. That's kind of maybe a little different in Iowa, what we have there. You just have to bring diverse partners together and work with a wide bunch. Don't take no for an answer right off the bat. You have to be persistent. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. When you work on these problems, when we work with limnologists, those are people that work with water quality and water quality issues. Sometimes it's taken you 30 or 40 years to get to a place with degraded water quality and poor issues within your lake, and you aren't going to solve it overnight. So you have to work at it. I think one of the things we note in Iowa is the lakes are still there. What we do with siltation sometimes in nutrients is that we still have the main body of the lake, and I'm sure you see it here, but you lose your coves, you lose your critical shallow water habitat, all the flooded brush or timber that used to be 4 feet deep is now 6 inches deep or not at all, and we've pushed everything to the main portion of the lake there. It's not as productive for systems, it's harder to fish, and you get out to the main part of the lake, then you're competing not only with the other fishermen, but you're competing with the power boaters and everyone else in the main part of the lake. So we've lost that connectivity to the shallow water portions of the lake that are absolutely critical for fish production and for habitat. And at the same time, when you lose those shallow water areas, you diminish and you lose water quality benefits too. This is a natural lake system up in northern Iowa, and they used lake restoration. This is the mayor of the city there, and he says that our restoration work was the inspiration for community to come together, not take the lake for granted, and they've moved forward with new businesses, and it's charting their destiny. They've even developed a resort along the lake now. You can get some great partners out there that what starts out as a fisheries or a water quality project, it can really morph into something more than that. This was our funding levels starting in 2005 when it wasn't very much to moving forward to where we've been historically over the years. And these are state dollars. We leverage where it's possible with local, limited federal dollars, I would say, is what I've discovered to date here. We do not have any funding match requirements because the lakes are so unique amongst them. We shoot for local support or local dollars, but we aren't driven by an absolute number that has to be, like you have to have 25% or a 50% cost share match to move forward. We don't do that. These are, for example, some of the partners that we use and work with. This Friends of Lake Darling would be similar to a Friends group that you have here in this group. They're just a little more diverse. They're not only about the lake, they're developing a shelter house and cabins and around the lake, so we have that. And then Department of Ag folks, City of Des Moines, Pheasants Forever, you name it, the Corps. We do work with the Corps on a couple of our Corps projects we do. And we also have in Iowa, when you buy a fishing license, embedded in that fishing license, there's a $3 fish habitat fee, and it generates for us about $1 million annually. Half of it goes to county conservation boards and the lakes that we work with, and then half of it stays within the Department of Natural Resources. And we do use that money, not as much on the lake restoration, but that's where some of our dollars come for actual in-lake fish habitat, like spawning beds, like brush piles, fish humps, fishing jetties, things like that. So we do have a funding source that way. We also in Iowa get about $2.5 million a year from gas tax sales called some marine fuel tax. We get some dollars that primarily works for building boat ramps and upgrading boat ramps, but we also can tap into those dollars sometimes and use that for some of our lake projects. Here's the National Reservoir Fish Habitat Partnership. What I pulled out are, I believe, 4 critical goals. Healthy aquatic systems, just exactly what I've talked about, what we're doing in Iowa. Prevent further degradation of fish habitat, that's where we're at. Reverse declines and increase the quality and quantity of fish habitat within these systems here. And this absolutely, we believe in it. It works for us in Iowa, and it should work in any state in the country here. There's our contact information. Go to this website up above at the top. That will get you, we generate an annual report, and it's 50 to 80 pages long, and you'll see each one of those in there for every year. And then this is our specific contact information. I might add one thing that's been difficult when you get this much money. Our legislature starts in January. It ends, hopefully, in April or May. They go home. We get our money in the 1st of July, new money, and then that's our fiscal year from July to June 30th, July 1 to June 30th of the next year. Well, that's right in the middle of construction season, in the middle of the summer. So you get this money. We get $9.6 million in July 1. I've got to generate an annual report to the legislature by December 31st, have it submitted to this infrastructure committee. Well, we just gave you $9.6 million in July. Why don't you have it spent? Well, sometimes it's seasonality. It takes years to generate permits. Multiple use projects, the weather can get in your way. So it has been a tremendous, I don't know, we may have some accountants in the room. I call them bean counters. Accountants. It's important to have them. Don't get me wrong. But this concept of multiple year projects and that the weather drives you and permits drive you is beyond. It's just numbers to them, and it drives them nuts that I don't have this money spent in December, and I can't do that. And so one of the ways we've gotten around it is we believe we have enough confidence in our restoration program. We develop a 10-year budget, I do now, and I project over the now to the next 10 years, I can't discount or I can't take into account inflation, with the existing dollars today, if I receive this level of funding, over the next 10 years, these are the projects I'm going to try and accomplish and get finished. That's been a concept that's worked pretty well. That kind of helps us explain that it's multiple year projects, takes multiple years of funding for projects to move forward, and gives them a sense that we do have a plan in place and that we can move. There's still some flexibility that we can adjust projects, but it's just not getting the money. I mean, the two worst things I had as I've been a project coordinator for lakes is one, I didn't have any money. And then one, I had a whole bunch of money. Because when you get a whole bunch of money, guess what? There's expectations. You got to get it spent. You have to move it out the door. So I went from griping all the time about not enough having enough money to having all this money at once and not sleeping at night, figuring out how I'm going to get it spent and moving projects forward. That's how it's worked, but it's been great to do this. And my message is, if we can do it in Iowa, you can do it in any state. I mean, there's just no doubt in my mind. I'm envious of the possibilities you have here in Texas, for example. It's just condensing folks. So we need that local work. We need to work locally on the lakes, and then we need to think bigger picture. We need to get to Austin, Texas. You do, and you need to get to the big cities, and all your partners are bigger. How are we all going to partner together to improve our aquatic resources here in the state of Texas? With that, thank you.